It's a good speaker. Yeah.
This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD Jeff Mudgett, author of Bloodstains. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thank you very much. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Jeff, first of all, where are you now?
I live in Las Vegas.
Oh, yes. We wanted to invite you to be a guest on some other shows too in person, but this is great. Uh, we
We can do
wanted
that another time. I've been to Chicago a lot.
Okay, awesome. Just let us know when you're in Chicago, and then we could do further interviews as well. And
Sounds fun.
great. Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about your background, your relation to H. Holmes, and what made you write Bloodstains.
All right. It started off early, and there's finally some of the people that I'm dealing with now are starting to understand what I was trying to write in Bloodstains. Not just another documentary about how many people Holmes murdered in the castle. It's on 63rd Street back at the World's Fair. More about what finding out who I was and where I came from, that terrible ancestor of mine, which when you start to realize who he was, he's one of the, I guess, top 10 most terrible you could possibly have. And, I'd known growing up that I was different. I'd known I had strange instincts, impulses, urges, those desires, but I'd struggled and I'd kept them at bay. I'd held them off. So what I tried to write about in Bloodstains was at 40 years old, finding out from my grandfather who I was. And he'd kept that a secret from the family all those years. And then all of a sudden, those instincts, those impulses, those things I didn't like about myself had a name, and they began to make a lot of sense.
What about your relatives, those who were related in the same bloodline? Did you ever have any conversations with them about what they felt? Did anybody else in your family have the same impulses as you?
Yes, although to tell you the truth, they were quite angry when I wrote the book, and about my desire to tell the truth about what obviously I didn't have any choice who I was, who I inherited those things from. And my father and I have had many long talks. My grandfather and I never communicated. He was a very strange man, a very successful man. He ran one of the big Pacific gas and electric plants in California, and but he wasn't friendly with the family, and we didn't know why. And then when that terrible secret came out, I gave him a break. Think about it. He was the grandson of that terrible man, and he had my life times 10 probably. So I tried to give him a chance, but he stayed secretive. He used to take off for the weekend, and he said he would go fishing, but he never took any of us with him. And I always resented that, because that's something I would have liked to have done with my grandfather. But anyway, so when he told the family the secret, and I decided to set my law career aside and research, America's history, uh, Chicago's history. And then the story started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, that to many of the family, that was very upsetting. But my mother and father, they've been with me the whole time, which I've really been thankful to them from the start. From the start.
Mhm. Did you confide to them what you were feeling, the impulses? If not in the beginning, then later?
Later, but never when I was a young boy. Never. I just kind of accepted that my life was going to be different than a lot of people, and I was dealing with it. I didn't commit crimes. I never hurt anyone like he did. I just didn't enjoy a lot of things because I always knew I'd have to set aside the negatives that would always come out. And like I said, when I found out where they'd come from, which when you get into medical science now, medical science is starting to appreciate inheriting, having those types of things passed on from relatives, which I'm finding amazed to read into now as they get more and more accepting that those psychopathic traits can be passed on from someone like Holmes. His real name was Herman Mudgett, but America knows him as Holmes. But so now that that's starting to blossom, that knowledge of the science, I'm enjoying that more and more, and it's certainly true. I can tell you that much of what they're writing about is. I had a unique experience, and they're right what they're trying to tell everyone about. Sometimes those things are not your choice. Sometimes those things are not developed from your experience in life. Sometimes they came from before.
Did researchers ever speak with you?
Once again,
Did researchers that investigate how ancestors affect the how heredity affects psychology? Did those researchers ever speak with you?
oh yeah, oh yeah. I did a podcast a couple of months ago. I don't know if it's out yet, but we discussed those things with a doctor, a neurologist who was fascinated with my story and my willingness to tell the world about it. And now we have a production company that wants to make a movie about the story. Um, Obviously utilize. It's going to be big. I'm really excited about it. I've been waiting 10 years for someone to do it, and now that it's coming out, I just can't wait to see. I got to read their script the other day, and it mesmerized me. It terrified me reading it, and it's about me and him. And they've decided it's based on the truth and my book, but it's fiction too, and they're going to make it entertaining for everyone that takes the chance to watch it. I'm very excited about it.
Have you done any research, or has anybody done research about uh, the people, the family line that came before H. Holmes? Was there any psychopathy in the earlier generations?
Not a lot. I would imagine more of that will come once the movie comes out and once people start understanding what I was trying to say in the book. Not about how many floors there were on the murder castle. Things, there's many books about that type of story. Mine's more about what happened to me. But I would imagine you're right. That research into before Holmes will be fascinating to see. I haven't done any of it, but it's there. It's there for the taking if someone wanted to take a look.
Mhm. Okay. So no, you don't know of anything yet, but it bears looking into, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I would imagine there are people looking into that. I mean, I know, when we did American Ripper, we had millions watching, my theory that my great great grandfather had been Jack the Ripper. And I think if you took a deeper look into what was before him, we might be surprised what we find.
Mhm. So when you visited their basement and you felt becoming possessed by your great great grandfather,
Possessed.
what was it like? Do you still remember exactly what happened, or
Oh yeah.
since you are able to remember because once you're possessed, you might be like another person and not you.
Oh yeah, well, and I enjoy when I get to go on shows like yours. I always try to start off by clarifying that my book is fiction based on a true story. It's I would say there's a lot in there that I um, fictionized out, but there's at least half the book is true, and that chapter where I tried to explain, and it's a difficult subject to write about, especially for a first time writer like I was. What I was trying to explain going down into that basement the first time with my best friend, trying to see if we could feel or experience anything, that possession you mentioned. But when I had started developing that. This is another thing the doctors are all working on too. That epilepsy. That once my grandfather told the family the secret, I developed that condition and started having seizures. And those seizures started becoming very dark and very evil, with voices, and I didn't know who it was, to tell you the truth, when it started. But these voices about explaining who I'd been as a younger man. So with that chapter about when we went down into that basement, and I had a seizure and those voices came out, and I tried my best to explain to anyone reading the book what that had felt like, what it had been about, how those voices did not like my friend down there with me, and they wanted me to move him out. And I tried to capture that, and that's what a lot of the people now are starting to see in the book, and they want to recreate, hopefully, in their stories, that people can see what actually happened.
Mhm. So what happened then with you and your friend during that episode?
Oh, the voice wanted me to kill him, and I tried to, and he was very lucky that I fought it off, because it came very close to me committing a murder, and I'd never come anywhere near that before. But that moment down in that basement, down in that place where I think, history struggles with how many people he murdered. I think we can all agree it was a mass murderer. That number was sufficient to be classified as that number. It's just a man who had gone to medical school and who was an expert at the elimination of criminal evidence after he had committed a terrible crime, and the substitution of corpses, and then eliminating them from police sight. But that I came very close, and I people are starting to see that now, that instead of, when I first wrote Bloodstains, and people didn't like that chapter, they had thought it was a little bit crazy, a little bit kooky, and how I'd just been trying to create some Stephen King material. Now they're starting to see that that was an actual medical condition I was experiencing, that seizure down in that basement, and those voices and visions that my friends saw too were something that needed to be shared with. And I'm hoping people take a stronger look at that now, and from what I'm being told, I had a phone call yesterday from the guys on the work on the production, and that basement chapter is going to be part of it.
What did your friend hear? What kind of voices did your friend hear?
The same kind, although he was very excited about what we were discovering. When we went down into the basement, we discovered some of the original tunnels that hadn't been destroyed when the post office bought that piece of property, tore the building down and put up the post office, which is still in operation there today. But when we went down there, he's an incredible man, and we've been friends for decades, and he had a lot of courage to go down there with me, if you think about it. And that chapter and that portion of the film is going to be about him a lot. But he was excited about going up into those tunnels and finding the things we did that I described in the book, and then having to deal with me, who wasn't his friend anymore when he came out of those tunnels.
Mhm. Did he feel it? Were you
Oh yeah.
able to discuss it with him too?
Oh yeah. But we're still best friends. We still discuss it. He knows that wasn't me.
Mhm.
He knows that wasn't what I was choosing to do, that I was being pushed. And that possession, like you said, I hope people give it the chance to try to understand that type of thing can be real. That experience, that feeling that we had down there, and some do and some don't. I know there's millions of people out there that believe in the paranormal, that believe in the spirit, in the supernatural. And to tell you the truth, when we walked down those cobweb steps that first time into the basement, we went down twice more after that, and I never felt the same thing. But I never had a seizure again down there. We were with film crews. We were with multiple. We had doctors with me just in case I did. But that first time when we walked down those steps, um, it was definitely different. And it was something that changed my belief in what exists and what doesn't for the rest of my life. And I know now that I'm hoping we get to go down to the basement again. I'm hoping we plan it out. I'm hoping that with a doctor, with a physician with me, we can try to promote another seizure, and maybe a film crew and some professionals in the paranormal world. They can observe what I experience, and maybe I'm hoping maybe that may be one of the one or two scenes that the world's been hoping for a long time.
Did you ever go down to the basement with just one person with you, and that did not happen again? Or perhaps you never went down to the basement with just one person with you?
No, Kim and I, his name was Kim Estes. We went down that first time with the custodian from the post office, but he received a call and had to go back up to the main floor while Kim and I stayed down in the basement. And that's when I experienced that condition. But when we went, History Channel hired me to do a show. They called it Haunted History. And we went back down into the basement, but not with Kim. It was with a professional actor or two, with the film crew, and the director, the History's production executives, and nothing happened.
Mhm.
I couldn't feel or experience anything.
Maybe it was on account of just the two of you alone there. Were you ever again down in the basement with just one person instead of with more than one person?
No, no.
Uh,
To tell you the truth, I was afraid. that was a terrifying moment in my life. And, you know, all of the troubles, all those things that I'd fought with my entire life came to be there in that moment. And to go back down there was going to take a lot of courage, especially doing it so that we could possibly create that same experience again for the world to see. And so we're talking about it now. I'm sure the post office will let us do it. Kim has said he'll go back down with me down into the basement, and there's a television cable network that wants to do it. They're planning it out, and it's it's so we'll see. Those things, as you know, those things take time, and we've got to get permission from the federal government now, and we've got to have the post office agree to let us do it again, which is harder now that they know what I wrote about.
Oh.
And but I think they will. I think they will. If there's a chance, we might discover something amazing.
Your friend Kim, he also heard voices, but he did not experience any seizure, right?
No, no, no. He was taking care of me. He was trying to get me out of the basement. And he didn't, he's not a doctor. He didn't really, that's one thing. Epilepsy is not like cancer. You don't have the doctors, the neurologists have a hard time dealing with that. I have medicine I take now every day, 2 or 3 pills a day to prevent any more seizures. And if we ever decided to do it again, that's why I told the crew, I said, we'd need a doctor to go with me, because I would have to avoid the medicine for 2 or 3 days before to make myself vulnerable for it happening again. But I'd be willing to do it if it might be something that science could appreciate, or the paranormal worlds, the spirit, the supernatural, and those things that I never believed in at all. But then that one day changed my whole outlook on what may be out there.
When you are not having a seizure afterwards, did you still how did you feel H.H. Holmes's hold on you when you were not in epilepsy mode?
What a great question. I think maybe all those shows, interviews I've done, that's the first time anyone's ever asked me that. It's something I've thought about a lot. And it's after that event, after that experience, I was reluctant to go to sleep, because that nightmare would come back up in my dream. But it's not like a normal nightmare, just a scary dream. It's a crystal clear vision of color and laughing and knowing where that voice, that thing wanted it to go. And then sometimes during those dreams, I'd have another seizure during my sleep. So as you might expect, there were times when I refused to go to sleep at night. I'd go try to see my doctor to make sure that if I did, because twice I've had what they call a grand mal seizure, the biggest one you can have, and people often die from those. And the one, I woke up in the back of an ambulance, and the ATM, the technicians were yelling. I had the mask on. They were working my chest, and they were yelling to each other, "We have him back. We have him back." And I know what it felt like, that black oblivion of nothing, absolute nothing. And so, as you might imagine, for these last 15 years, my life has been trying to enjoy things without being obsessed with that thing still. And I was getting closer to it. I was getting closer to it, and then all of a sudden, these Hollywood guys want to do a major motion picture, and then the television guys want to do another miniseries. So it's coming back, I fear. But I think this time I'll know what we're doing much more, and we can control it perhaps better.
What about when you were writing the book? How was that hold on you uh, reacting to your trying to put those memories and what you were feeling into words?
Oh yeah, it. It's. I tried to capture those moments of just him and me alone in the book. Those were absolutely true. I can assure your listeners that if they ever did read Bloodstains, those are absolutely true. I just, they were of moments of dreams or seizures. I was trying to capture my best, something I could never prove with evidence that actually happened. But they were terrifying. And it's when you stop and think about how your ancestor, your great great grandfather, my grandfather's grandfather, may have been the most evil genius that ever lived, that actually took that evil genius to terrible heights. Children, everything, just terrible. And how he could have been, he went to the University of Michigan Medical School, he graduated, he was a doctor, he could have been anything he wanted to be. That's how smart he was. He fired his lawyers during his murder trial and conducted his own defense, and he'd never gone to law school. And when you read that trial transcript, it's amazing to see him there, him and the judge back and forth. That could be a movie in itself. Him cross-examining one of his poor wives. She wasn't really his wife because he'd never divorced the first one. But cross-examining her, and they're back and forth. It's an amazing event, and the jury watching him, and the anyway. So when you realize he could have been anything he wanted to be, that's how smart he was. And he took that terrible side. And he wasn't, the words psychotic and sociopathic, those words that neurology uses to try to describe terrible people, sometimes work. I don't think they work with H.H. Holmes. I think that's what he was. He wasn't sick, he was evil. And I think maybe society needs to understand there is that side to some human beings.
Has anybody tried to figure out if H.H. Holmes was sick? Is there any way for them to try to find out?
Oh yeah, there's many books. I mean, the Devil in the White City is a great. I loved reading Eric Larson's book, the bestseller about Holmes and the castle. And I think Eric went into whether he could determine if Holmes was sick or just evil. And he struggled with it in the book. And I know there's been other authors who've tried that same thing. I don't know if there's been a neurological study by JAMA or any of the professionals about it. I wish they would. I wish they would take that out, and I'd help them do it, because I think we could use it if we found out that no, 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 this was him. This was him. This was him being. Oh, that's what he wanted. And he wasn't afraid of being caught. He wasn't afraid of going to prison. He wasn't afraid of those things. He just avoided them because they would have prevented him from doing the things he liked to do. And that's why I like the idea of someday, the things that are going on now, and people taking a second look at bloodstains will know the truth about what a human being is capable of, what potentially lies with some of us. And I think when you go back in history enough, hundreds of years, every periodically you find another like that, which I don't think were psychotically sick. I think they were just that. And they had the opportunity, they had the assets and the chance to pull those things off. And H. Holmes certainly did.
You mean that they had the position? Yes.
Money. They had money. They had power. They had authority. Yeah, like a king, like a dictator, like those things.
Mhm. What if researchers wanted to research his DNA? Is there any DNA of H. Holmes still available just for researchers to find out maybe there is something in the sequence that is comparable to other serial killers?
Well, I'm sure the University of Pennsylvania scientists still have their samples. I've never held them in my hand. I know they took my DNA and compared it to the body we exhumed, and the scientists there gave up on it after all summer long trying to get them to match. And His Honor, the judge that allowed us the exhumation, he ordered that comparison to be made, and it wasn't a match. They tried, they wanted to say it was Holmes, and I've argued with them these 7 or 8 years since. And I'm hoping to get another group of scientists to take a closer look, maybe some FBI to take a look, but the DNA wasn't a match. And His Honor said that's what he insisted on, for them to identify the body with DNA. And then when they told him they couldn't get it to match, they decided to call it degraded, that the body had laid in the grave for that 100 years or so, and that they were giving up on it. They actually did interviews after the show about it. And that the two scientists that we work with at the UPenn were awesome ladies, awesome, really, really intelligent. They'd never done forensic science. They dug up dinosaurs and Indian arrowheads and things like that, and they were way over their head. We needed a professional investigator there, a criminal science investigator, because as we went down into those two graves, we found two graves. One was empty, just an empty coffin. The other had the concrete that Holmes had insisted the body be buried in. Well, that concrete caused debate back and forth. The ones there that insisted it was Holmes wanted that to be because Holmes didn't want any grave robbers to touch his body after he was dead. I knew it was because he didn't want anyone to take a look to see who it really was. And that's knowing who Holmes was and what he was capable of thinking. And we still haven't got to that point. So when this news material comes out with the entertainment groups, I'm hoping we get to take a second look at the DNA not matching. We actually, the anthropologists and archaeologists, we brought the body out. We took it to the lab at the University of Pennsylvania. They did a wonderful job setting the skeleton out on their lab tables there, where they got the DNA they wanted. We used the most renowned criminal DNA comparison experts in the world in London, King's College. And they told us, and I was there while they did it, they were exactly where they wanted that DNA taken. There's an osseous pocket in the back of your skull where the bone is very powdery. And they said they wanted that sample from there. They didn't want any of the teeth. They didn't want any bone, hip bone, knee bone, any of those. They wanted that pocket. And they assured us If we got him with a diamond drill bit, we actually had this fancy drill with a diamond drill bit that went back into the skull and got them the sample. And then they took my blood, and they assured us they'd have it back to us in 3 to 5 days with the results. It was almost, they were almost laughing about this was kind of a simple, rather simple comparison compared to what they usually had to do. Well, all summer long they tried, and then they finally gave up. It wasn't a match, and
So is
I'm
it
convinced. I'm convinced it wasn't Holmes. There was another man was hung in his place. The body was substituted in the grave, and Holmes walked off a free man to start a new blank check life.
so he had to have had an accomplice to help him with that then?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And that's where I get in trouble too. When I bring that up, they all start calling me a conspiracy theorist, all those things, because obviously he couldn't have done it himself. He'd have had to have apprentices, assistants, maybe 3 or 4. And knowing Holmes and what he pulled off over his lifetime doesn't surprise me at all.
Holmes seems to have been able to talk many people into doing anything that he wanted.
Exactly.
Very manipulative.
Very, very, he was a very, I hate to use that word, but he was a very charming, evil man.
How did you feel he tried to manipulate you?
Oh, when my grandfather, this is something, and I would never be able to prove. I've just had feelings about when my grandfather told the family about our secret. When my grandmother had to admit that we weren't related to General Robert E. Lee of the Civil War, with that we were related to a serial killer, perhaps the worst of all time. Um, and my grandfather was telling the family was sitting at a family dinner, and I wrote about it in the book. And he told all of us, but he was staring directly at me the entire time he was talking. And then when he died, he left, some of the things that he'd collected over his life regarding his grandfather to me, and had my father give them to me, because I think he knew I was the one that would look into the story and perhaps tell the truth that he'd wanted to all his life. I could tell, but he wasn't. Being the great great grandson is one thing. Being the grandson of that is very, very close. And I think he was worried about a lot of things that he'd been afraid of his whole life too.
Were you able to speak with your grandfather and ask him if he ever felt the presence like you did?
No, no, he told me to leave him alone the rest of his life. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. He didn't want the name mentioned in his house.
Well, it does bear considering why he went fishing, why he wanted some alone time, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of speculation that we could make about
Yeah.
that.
Oh, I've thought about that. I've thought about that a lot, and I don't have any evidence to establish that what you're thinking could have occurred. Although, with what I grew up with, I know he would have had to have had that times 10, what I felt,
Exactly.
and how close I came to that actually happening with my best friend. So I agree with you. There's that possibility.
Do you know if he ever suffered from any kind of epilepsy or something akin to epilepsy?
I don't know. It's a great question. I never had the chance to ask my grandmother or my grandfather's doctors when he died. I didn't know. And my father and mother, they didn't know. He was a very quiet man. He didn't share those secrets except that one family dinner. That was it.
what about the resemblance between your grandfather and Holmes and between you and Holmes?
No, I don't know about how if my grandfather ever had any experience or feeling or events with the ghost. I don't know if he had that same thing I experienced. Not he and I never got to sit down and discuss those things. I don't think he would have had I asked him the question you just asked me. He would have been upset with me.
Mhm. I was referring to physical resemblance.
Physical?
Yes, like facial resemblance and between the how your grandfather looked maybe in younger pictures in relation to Holmes and how what your resemblance when you were younger in relation to Holmes.
Never had. I've never had anyone come up to me and say I looked like him. I don't. I saw my grandfather 4 or 5 times my entire life. I don't really have a picture of his facial resemblance in my head. We've got some pictures, but they're those old black and white professional portraits that they can pretty much make look like anyone. The ones that come back and say, God, he looks like him, are the ones that say he looked like the BBC composite photograph drawing of Jack the Ripper,
Mm.
and how close the photo of Holmes when the Boston police arrested him, and they took that arrest photograph, and then they lined that up side by side. How close that looks, and when you take I still get people coming up to me to say that the nose, the ears, the chin, the lips, the eyes, the eyebrows are all exact. And I said, well, I said, that's one of those composite drawings by experts, but it's not anything that ripperologists are ever going to admit is the same photograph of my great great grandfather. They're just not going to do that. What we have now, which it's been almost 12, 13 years since I gave my TED talk about the handwriting comparisons, about the Dear Boss letter and Holmes's handwriting, the letters that I have, and how I took them to the renowned scientists at Cedar Fox at the University of Buffalo, the ones that the FBI uses, who created that computer program on handwriting comparison. And when they came back with 97, 96% similarity, and they told me, Jeff, we need to reprogram our work to have it cover the 19th century font, which was a little different than our handwriting now in the 20th century. And they said, but we need quite a bit of money for someone to back us up on that for us to do that work. And I couldn't afford it. And then History Channel refused to do it. And they said, but if we had done that, they told me this face to face, we might have come back with 100% that he did write Dear Boss. They didn't say that when they came out with their first comparison. They said it was similar in style. That's all they'd go. But they told me if we ever reprogrammed their work, come up with the money, that they there was a possibility they could come back with 100%, which I always took meant them saying on national television, H. Holmes wrote the Dear Boss letter.
Were
And
there
I've never had anyone come back to me these 12, 13 years. Never anyone from Scotland Yard, never anyone from FBI, never anyone from any handwriting expertises or whoever does that kind of stuff for criminal law. And they've all looked. I know they've all looked. No one's ever come back to me and said, nope, can't be. It's not him. Let us show you what we found. In all those years,
have any investigators performed the analysis uh, with H. Holmes with other serial killers that came after him to see if maybe it was uh, maybe serial killers have a certain way of writing that run across their profiles.
No, but it's a great question, and someone I'd be fascinated to watch to see someone do that with like the Zodiac killer, those, and see how their handwriting compares with my ancestors.
How were you able to shake off this possession? Was it getting the epilepsy under control or by other means as well?
Yeah, it's the time. It's the uh, I started taking more of the medicine, but time, as you know, we're 7.5 years away from American Ripper on History Channel, and it started to, like I said earlier, it started to my life started taking over my original life instead of just being possessed with this Holmes thing, and and I started to get over it, and I started to enjoy my family. I started to enjoy my wife. I started to enjoy those things again. Um, but I, but I've noticed it's starting to come back a little bit now. A major motion picture. I've known it was going to happen sooner or later, and now seeing how they're putting the script together, I'm just fascinated to see, and they're doing it the way I knew it would have to go. It's have you ever watched the television series Dexter,
No.
about the
Yes, I.
serial killer that was born a lot like me? He's in my shoes, and he started killing in his own life, but he started killing bad people.
Mhm.
And that show was a major hit, and I'm one of my favorites.
Yeah, I
And
heard about it. I heard about it, but I just didn't
yeah,
get to have the time to watch. But I did hear about it.
yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how they work it, and then the TV group wants to do what you were the questions you were asking about earlier. They want to recreate that basement possession, and they want to see scientifically if they can for their first time. And they work paranormal with all the professionals. They want the same channel. They want to see if they can record me experiencing that again, and maybe come up with something that the world's been desiring for decades now.
Well, hopefully the impact won't be too take too long and have a too long of an impact on you, and that you would have to take time to overcome again. It will be
Yeah.
you have to think about yourself as well. However, I did want to ask when you were slowly time was helping you to heal from this possession. What about when you were walking in the sun? Was there any difference when you were having sunlight on you? Did that help
Mhm.
you feel any better during when you were trying to fight this off?
Great question. I think we can help a lot of people with my answer to this if they take me seriously. My sister studies that, what you just brought up. I don't know what she calls it, but she started getting me to uh, she started getting me to
Light therapy?
go out at sunrise when the sun came up, and she promised me that if I went outside and watched the sun come up in the red sky in the morning and breathe that deep, clean, fresh air that you get in the morning, that energy would help me. And you know what? It did. It did. I do it every day now when I can.
And at that time, you were still in Chicago?
No, that's when I was in California and here.
I was just thinking that so when when you did encounter that possession, you were living in Chicago, at least in the metro area?
I've never lived in Chicago, but when I was working on Bloodstains, when I was working on all the TV shows that I was doing, when I was working on American Ripper, I was staying downtown Chicago a lot. And then I'd take trips out, you know, that 3-4 miles out to 63rd and I forget the side street now where the post office is, but 63rd and Walters. I forget, but at the with the subway station there, and that was a different place to be. I can tell you the truth. That post office. When we first went down into that basement, the employees there all thought it was haunted. They used the word haunted. Okay. I mean, I don't know what that means to paranormalists or the spirit believers, but and they would not go down into that basement. So that first time we went down into the basement, it was barricaded. The superintendent finally, after like 2 hours, us talking him into it, allowed us to go into the basement. We moved, with the custodian's help, we moved those old boxes aside to get into the door, to the door, and then down the steps, which were, as in a Stephen King movie, covered in cobwebs and little ant rats in the basement floor. It was terrifying, and all the things that were going through my head. If I hadn't had my best buddy Kim there, bravest man I ever have known, I wouldn't have gone. But the looks on those employees in that post office when we came back up out of that, up those steps, they were looking at us like we were the strangest characters in the world. I'll never forget.
Well, after your experience, you did change. The two of you probably were looked much different from what you looked like when you went downstairs because of what you experienced.
If I had known what was going to happen, I would have done a much better job on establishing the evidence, the before and after evidence of our appearances. You know, the barricading of the basement, of the cobwebs, the rats running. I'd have done a much better job photographing that stuff for the world to see what we saw.
The employee said that the basement was haunted. What about the upstairs? Was there any haunting upstairs that they spoke of in the post office?
Didn't hear of any.
Hmm. So many people died there, probably in the hundreds. So uh, uh, it's probably one of the most air, places where the most people died a horrible death, and to have a post office there with a lot of people going back and forth. Did you ever hear about having more people walking back and forth on a haunted ground would help dispel some of the haunting?
No, I haven't.
But nobody wanted to go in the basement.
Oh yeah, there were other authors that wanted to go. I don't know if the post office gave them permission. They were, you know, they connected with me because of who I was, and I know all of them there had their beliefs about that basement. Which, to be honest with your listeners, it wasn't an overlap of the original castle. It wasn't directly over the top. There was like an overlap on the sides where the basement actually covered some of where the original basement had been. But the post office was built to the side a little bit, but there was an overlap. And those, you could tell those employees, they had many strong beliefs about that place and what had really gone on there.
Whose idea was it to go in the basement? Was it you or Kim's idea?
Oh, it was mine. I asked him to come with me.
And what caused you to want to go to the basement?
Oh, I knew I'd see him. I had a feeling. By that time, I knew there was more than just me writing a book. This had taken over my life, and that was probably the closest I was going to get to him, unless the body we exhumed had been him. And I'll tell you, one of the most, again, nothing I can prove, nothing evidence will ever show, and it's something the other side argues with me all the time. But when we had exhumed him and when the skeleton was at the University of Pennsylvania lab, when the anthropologists had done that amazing job laying the skeleton out, I had I had always remembered that Shakespeare scene with Hamlet where he talks to the skull. And we were there filming, the whole crew. History's production outfit was there filming with us, and my co-host was there, Amaryllis, and we were up having lunch, and I knew that this was my only chance because they would have never let me touch the bones had I asked. So I snuck away from the lunch table. I can remember every step, and went down lower, down another couple floors to where the labs were. Dark room, but enough light for me to see the skeleton. I walked over and took the skeleton in the palm of my hand and stared into the eye sockets. Deep black holes with no ending, and asked him why? Why, with such a brilliant mind, with everything you had wanted or could have desired, you were a licensed doctor, and you could have set up a hospital in Chicago, and you could have been famous for that. You could have invented medicines, you could have solved disease. You had all those abilities. Why this con man, this fraud, this thing that when you study some of his crimes, you still can't. You're amazed at how deeply they went and how premeditated they were. So when I asked that skull, why? Absolutely nothing came back. Nothing. I'll never forget that. And I knew at that moment it wasn't him. We hadn't done the testing yet, the DNA, any of that, but I knew it wasn't him. And of course, when I brought that up to those scientists, they all laughed me off. The one thing they did do is they were very mad at me that my hand had touched that skull and maybe ruined the DNA comparisons. But the experts at King's College it didn't matter that they were going to use the drill bit to get deep into the skull for their sample. But that when I asked it why and nothing came back, I knew we were on a different investigation, that the world needed to stick with me. And History Channel wouldn't go farther into that part of the investigation.
Was there anybody that tried to investigate what might have happened and where Holmes might actually be?
No, I was the only one. I was pretty much the only one of the whole crew, the investigation team, the film crew, History Channel executives. They'd spent way too much money on American Ripper. That exhumation had cost them a fortune, and they were quite upset. The rest of the crew, my co-host was almost there with me. She had her doubts. She was a CIA investigator before, actually worked for the CIA. Brilliant lady. And I was really the only one that knew this wasn't him. And when the DNA came back 0, I just thought, wow, that just proves that skull not talking to me that day. And especially when I had that experience in the basement already. So everyone pretty much just decided that was Holmes and it was time to rebury it. And we put it back as the judge ordered us to do.
So what other lingering effects are you able to be rid of him totally now, or do you still find yourself uh, having some problems?
It's another great question. I actually think that whoever that is, whoever that thing that bothers me, possesses me, I think it knows that I'm its only chance to ever, and I think it's interested in the truth being finally known. It kind of, I hate to say it like this, but it's looking forward to it being done finally. And I think it knows I'm probably its only chance. And then people like you getting the chance to come on your show to express my honest belief, despite the fact that half the people listening will probably think I'm crazy for having said some of the things I did with you today. And I can see that. I would have thought that same thing before about myself. But I know it's starting to realize that truth thing, how it got away with having another hung in its place, how it got away with substituting that corpse, how it got away with faking the dental impressions. Amazing pieces of evidence. All those things now will likely be seen and maybe appreciated by a world out there that will finally know what they were dealing with in 1888, in 1896. And it was truly one of a kind.
You said that you heard other voices when you heard H.H. Holmes's voice in your head and in the basement. Were those other voices other voices of evil that were part of him, or were they the other voices of some of the victims? Did you have any sense of who those voices were?
Another wonderful question. No one's ever asked me that before. No, I tried to write about that in that chapter of the book about down in the basement. And they were as we were walking through the hallway in the basement, this long hallway, which I tried to describe. And there's pictures of that. The wall, the concrete, the stucco actually stretched out in facial shapes. Not nothing you could identify, but these facial shapes. And as we walked more and more of them down that hallway with voices, and they were the innocent victims. They weren't the evil. He was the only evil that I've ever talked to. But those faces and those voices, I felt very misfortune for them that day. And I can still see it as clear as a bell, as clear as anything. Those faces stretching out from the concrete stucco walls.
There were some horror movies of faces coming out from walls, as as in some sequences. I do remember a couple of those too.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that often happens with other people as well, or maybe they got it from what you described.
Or I'm sure there are naysayers or doubters that would say that I had seen those movies before sometime and that my mind being so scared about where we were at the time, maybe I had recreated them myself and they hadn't been real. I disagree. I think I know what I saw that day, and it was Oh, if I don't know if that type of thing would ever be recordable, but if it was, if it ever could be, what a shock for the entire world to see, no?
Yes. And what were those faces expressing?
Oh, they were sorry. They were sad. They were, I don't, they never gave me speeches or anything like that. Just kind of moans and groans and actually wishing me caution, trying to get me to be careful about where I was going down there. And which I remembered very, very clearly. And I've always never forgotten that.
So they were helping you, warning you, and not expressing the pain that they must have felt when they died.
I don't know how they died. I don't know if there was pain or not. I know the when you read about the murder castle, you read in the books after, it's mostly about newspaper articles, wonderful articles by the greatest newspapers in the world at the time. The New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun, all of them, Baltimore, all the Philadelphia newspapers, all of them, when the world discovered, when the Chicago police discovered what had been going on there, they wrote great articles and they're still there. I mean, you can still get them. And that's where most of the books, the documentaries come from authors interpreting those articles. But no one saw those facts. They were, recreating them in their mind, what might have happened with that terrible killer. So for someone to say they know how those victims died, whether they were suffocated or poisoned or with a knife, I don't know. I know Holmes eliminated the evidence and most of those bodies, and he had the train right there next to the castle to do it, and the furnace and the acid baths he had, and the chemicals and those things, which the Chicago police talked about. They said they never found out how many bodies he murdered down there. They could never discover that evidence, which doesn't surprise me at all with him. But they did say, which I always kind of take to the bank, those Chicago police, which the superintendent at the time there when they investigated the castle before had been Holmes's private lawyer, which gets right into how deep Holmes goes. When he came out and was interviewed by the Chicago papers, he admitted that they had had hundreds go missing during the World's Fair. Hundreds that might have been associated with the hotel and Holmes, but they couldn't prove that. And no one ever will be able to prove or disprove that.
What about those tunnels? Is there a chance that there might be even more tunnels that
Oh, yeah.
have not been discovered yet?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There, that should be studied by archaeologists, not me and Kim. There should be professionals with an ex-FBI agent that goes down into the tunnels and sees what they can determine. I've thought that for a long time.
When H. Holmes communicated with you, what did he say?
Oh, just I think I tried to capture it in the book. If I tried to quote him now, I'd probably be misstating what I wrote in the book. I'd rather have you read that there. But he didn't want Kim in the basement with me that day.
And
He didn't like Kim. He didn't like Kim at all. I don't know why. I don't know why.
okay.
Other than he wanted me down there with him by ourselves.
Hmm. And there were no other relations of you that had the same feeling, that same
No,
drive to go downstairs to their
no,
basement.
none.
What was the reaction of your family that you did go to the basement? Did they ever talk with you about that?
You know, I'm glad you asked that too, because that's one of the great moments of my entire journey. His Honor, the Philadelphia judge who allowed us the exhumation. We had to get his order. He told me he wanted me to go receive the consent of every one of my living family members. So I traveled back to California and up and down, and they all, well, they expressed disappointment and regret. They agreed to sign the consent forms that I took back to His Honor that allowed the exhumation. So I've never forgotten that. That was very big of them. Any one of them could have said no, and he would have said no.
And do you still remember how many of these relatives of yours, descendants of H.H. Holmes, right? They still are related. Are they? It has to be everybody that was in the bloodline or even related by marriage had to sign.
No, I think it was bloodline. I'm not sure the exact number, but that was, we're talking 8 years ago now.
Mhm. And you got and who was in charge of finding everybody that
Me, just me,
mhm.
just me. The old California lawyer, just me.
Do you still remember how old you were, how young you were when you first felt this yourself out of place, something wrong? And what exactly was that something wrong that you were feeling as a young boy?
Oh, I think, first conscious thoughts, 4 or 5 years old. I always knew I was different. I just felt it. I couldn't define it. I didn't know how to express it. It wasn't something I was going to share with family, my mother or my father. I wasn't going to do that yet. I didn't know about Holmes. I didn't know what it was or what it meant. It wasn't until 40 when I had the name attached to those things. But I knew, my life was different. My life was different. Just little things like everyone around me loved dogs and cats, and I never felt that stuff. I wanted to. I wished I could have. I always tried to express it just so that I could belong with the group. Those kind of things. But those are difficult things for the human mind. I think all of us have some of those things. I just think there's very few that admit them with a name attached to them like I've done in my life now. But I think all of us have differences with the others around them, and they wonder why they are different. And I think that's not unusual.
You said that you didn't have much connection with the animals. You didn't have the feeling, the love for animals. But what were animals' reactions to you? Did you notice?
They like me. Yeah, they did.
Hmm. Good. So they wanted their pets. They wanted some attention from you
Oh
then.
yeah, yeah. They'd run up to me. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, you do seem to be a very, very likable man, Jeff Mudgett, and thank you so much for joining us on WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. If our listeners want to learn more about you, where should they go? And is that is the only book you wrote, or did you write other maybe short pieces that people could also try to find?
No, I'm working on another now, but it has nothing to do with Holmes. It's a detective story that I've always been fascinated with, detective stories. But I tell you what, I would like to, when the film crew decides that the secrets they have about their project, when they let me know. One of the interesting things, when they found out I was going to do your show today, they actually called me and said do not discuss the script. But they said that when that's all okay, they'd be happy for me to come back on with you and discuss all the details of the new movie when it comes out.
That would be wonderful. Thank you for that. We would love that. Thank you
Okay. Well,
so
I
much.
tell you what, I've had a lot of fun this morning. You've asked some wonderful questions. I've had shows like this for years, and two or three that you asked, I've always wondered why no one wanted to know, and you did a wonderful job.
Thank you so much, Chef Mudgett. And what is your website?
Oh, you know what? You just go on I'm on the Facebook page, the Bloodstains.
Okay.
I'm on there almost every day. Anything new that comes up about the investigation, about the journey, about the story, I try to put up, and I've got some great followers that are 100% believers in the story, and we go back and forth, and whenever they come up with new evidence, they always share it there on the page, and I'm amazed sometimes at the things they come up with.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chef Mudgett. We will talk again soon, and be sure to update us about the movie.
Thank you very much. I had a great time.
Thank you.